In the untold shadows of America's frontier, cruelty wore many masks. Montana Territory, 1878, a land where a person's worth was judged at first glance and where some wounds were impossible to hide. They say beauty dies quick out west, but nobody tells you how dignity gets slaughtered daily. Whispers followed her everywhere in Blackwater Ridge. The woman whose face told a story no one bothered to hear, only mock. In a town built on silver and spite, she became their favorite sport. But history's pages hold secrets about who we really are when faced with true courage, about what happens when one man refuses to see the world through the same cruel eyes as everyone else. What you're about to witness isn't just another tale of the West. It's a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about beauty, worth, and the power of a single moment to change lives forever. Is this just another love story? Far from it. This is about what happens when a society's ugliness meets a beauty they can't comprehend. About the day everything changed in Blackwater Ridge, when a black cowboy who'd seen his own share of prejudice decided enough was enough. If you've ever felt judged, overlooked, or dismissed because of something you couldn't control, this story is for you. If you've ever wondered what real courage looks like, not the kind that faces down gunfighters, but the kind that stands tall against everyday cruelty, you need to watch until the very end. This is the kind of story that changes how you see the world around you. The kind that reminds us that the most powerful act of rebellion is sometimes simply recognizing the humanity in someone else when no one else will. Subscribe to The Black Rancher right now and hit that notification bell, because stories this powerful don't come along every day. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth, regardless of what the world sees when it looks at them. Now, let's ride into Blackwater Ridge, where a woman's scars became a battlefield for her very soul. Eliza Foster moved through Blackwater Ridge like a ghost trying not to be seen. 27 years old, with intelligence shining in her eyes and burns covering the left side of her face and neck, lasting reminders of the night fire took her parents and her former life. The whispers followed her everywhere. Here comes Scarface Eliza. Don't look her in the eye, bad luck. What kind of man would ever want damaged goods like that? She'd arrived 6 months ago, purchasing the small dry goods store on the edge of town with money from her family's insurance. The previous owner had been desperate to sell, desperate enough to overlook selling to a woman, especially one who looked like her. The bell above the door jingled as Eliza restocked shelves with newly arrived supplies. The store was empty as usual. Most townsfolk preferred to shop when her assistant, young Jimmy Fletcher, was minding the counter. "Miss Foster," Sheriff Reeves entered, removing his hat. "Got a letter for you." She nodded silently, taking the envelope. The sheriff lingered, uncomfortable. "Town meeting tonight at Holloway's. You might want to attend. There's talk about your store." "What about my store?" Her voice was soft but steady. "Some folks think it ain't proper. A woman like yourself running a business on Main Street says it's affecting other merchants." She met his gaze directly, something that always made people uncomfortable. "Is there a law against it, Sheriff?" "No, ma'am, there ain't." "But then I'll see you at the meeting." She turned back to her inventory. After he left, Eliza opened the letter. Another offer to buy her out, this time from Harlan Wells, owner of the Silver Summit Hotel. The offer was insultingly low. Just then, the door opened again and 2 women entered, their silk dresses and elaborately styled hair marking them as members of Blackwater Ridge's social elite. "Oh, I told you she'd be here," one whispered too loudly to the other. "I was hoping for the boy." Eliza straightened her spine. "Good afternoon, ladies. What can I help you with today?" Margaret Wells, Harlan's wife, smiled thinly. "We need fabric for the town celebration, 20 yards of red bunting." "Of course. I just received a shipment. It's in the back." Eliza moved to the storeroom, aware of their eyes on her. "Can you imagine," she heard Margaret whisper, "having to look at that face in a mirror every day? I'd rather die." The other woman giggled. "I heard the doctor in Denver said she'd never heal right. Some things are just too broken to fix." Eliza returned, arms laden with red fabric, her face expressionless despite the burning in her chest. As she measured the fabric, the door opened again. The women fell silent as a tall black man entered, his presence immediately filling the small space. Dust from the trail covered his clothes, but there was nothing road-weary about the way he carried himself. His eyes, deep brown and observant, took in the scene before settling on Eliza. "Ladies," he nodded politely. The women gathered their purchases quickly and left without another word. "Can I help you?" Eliza asked, aware she was staring but unable to stop herself. Black cowboys weren't uncommon in Montana Territory, but they rarely came into Blackwater Ridge, a town known for its particular brand of hostility. "I'm looking for supplies." His voice was deep, resonant. "And information." "What kind of information?" "The kind that tells me if a man named Harlan Wells still owns half this town." Something cold settled in Eliza's stomach. "He's working on owning all of it." The stranger nodded, as if she'd confirmed something important. "I'm looking for work too. Heard the Murphy Ranch might be hiring." "They are, but they don't hire." She stopped herself. A slight smile touched his lips. "Don't hire men who look like me. Some things never change." He extended his hand. "Isaiah Freeman." She hesitated only a moment before taking it. "Eliza Foster." Outside, a group of men had gathered, peering through the window. Isaiah noticed them but didn't react. "What brings you to Blackwater Ridge, Mr. Freeman?" she asked, beginning to gather the supplies he needed. "Unfinished business." His eyes held hers for a moment too long. "And please, call me Isaiah." As he paid for his supplies, their fingers touched briefly. For the first time in months, Eliza felt something other than shame or anger. It was possibility, dangerous and unexpected. "There's a town meeting tonight," she found herself saying, "at Holloway's saloon." He nodded. "I'll keep that in mind, Miss Foster." As Isaiah left the store, the men outside fell silent, parting reluctantly to let him pass. Eliza watched him go, aware that something fundamental had shifted in her carefully constructed existence. What she didn't know was that Isaiah Freeman had come to Blackwater Ridge with a purpose, one that would collide with her life in ways neither of them could imagine. Isaiah Freeman led his horse down Blackwater Ridge's main street, feeling the weight of hostile stares. He'd experienced worse, but there was something particularly venomous about this town's brand of hatred. It seeped from every false-fronted building, poisoning the very air. Outside the livery stable, a trio of men blocked his path. "Help you, boy?" The largest one stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. Isaiah recognized the deliberate insult, but kept his expression neutral. "Looking to stable my horse. Don't recall seeing any vacancies for your kind. Didn't realize horses had preferences about who pays for their feed." Isaiah's voice remained calm, but his stance shifted subtly. The tension broke when an older man emerged from the stable, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. "That'll be enough, Decker. I decide who stables horses here." The men retreated, muttering threats. The stablemaster, O'Malley according to the painted sign, gestured Isaiah inside. "You picked the wrong town to stop in, mister." Isaiah led his stallion into an empty stall. "I picked exactly the right town." O'Malley studied him curiously. "You got business here?" "With Harlan Wells." Something flickered in the old man's eyes. "Wells ain't the sort who does business with... He'll do business with me." Isaiah removed his saddlebags and paid for 3 nights' board. "What can you tell me about the dry goods store, the woman who runs it?" O'Malley's eyebrows rose. "Eliza Foster came here about 6 months back. Keeps to herself mostly on account of..." He gestured vaguely toward his face. "The burns. Happened back east somewhere. Fire took her whole family, left her with those scars and nowhere to go. Bought old man Hobson's store when nobody else wanted it." O'Malley lowered his voice. "Town ain't been kind, especially the women folk. Something about her gets under their skin. Maybe 'cause despite everything, there's still beauty there if you bother to look. And Harlan Wells," O'Malley spat on the ground, "wants her gone, wants her store, wants everything he don't already own. Been pressuring her to sell, but she won't budge." Isaiah nodded, absorbing this information. "Where can a man get a room in this town?" "Silver Summit Hotel's the only proper place, but Wells owns it. Wouldn't recommend it for you. There's rooms above the saloon. Murphy don't care who rents as long as the money's good. After securing lodging above Murphy's saloon, Isaiah carefully unpacked his saddlebags in the sparse room. From a hidden pocket, he removed a worn leather packet tied with string. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings, legal documents, and a faded photograph of a young black couple standing proudly in front of a small ranch house. Written on the back, Freeman's Rest, 1862. Also in the packet was a deed to 100 acres of prime Montana territory land that now sat beneath the Silver Summit Hotel and half of Blackwater Ridge's main street. Land that had belonged to Isaiah's parents before they were murdered, and their property stolen by a young, ambitious Harlan Wells. Isaiah spread the documents on the bed, including a letter from a sympathetic clerk in the Territorial Land Office confirming his suspicions. The deed transfers had been forged. For 15 years he'd gathered evidence, built connections, saved money. Now he was ready. He wasn't just here for justice. He was here to take back what was rightfully his. The town meeting would start soon. Isaiah tucked a small derringer into his boot, not because he planned violence, but because he knew this town well enough already to recognize danger. Then he headed downstairs, thinking about the woman with the scarred face and clear eyes, who somehow stood at the center of Wells' latest land grab. The saloon was packed when he arrived, buzzing with anticipation. He found a spot in the back corner, where shadows offered some protection from prying eyes. From this vantage point, he could see everything, including Eliza Foster's entrance minutes later. The crowd parted as she walked in, whispers following in her wake. She held herself rigidly, dignity her only armor against their stares. When someone deliberately stepped on her dress hem, tearing it, laughter erupted. Eliza froze, face flushing beneath her scars. Isaiah's hands tightened into fists, but before he could move, she straightened her shoulders and continued walking. In that moment, he saw a strength that matched his own. Harlan Wells stood on a makeshift platform at the front of the room, every inch the prosperous businessman in his tailored suit. At 60, his hair had gone silver, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. The same eyes that had watched him passively as Isaiah's childhood home burned to the ground with his parents trapped inside. "Friends and neighbors," Wells began, "we're gathered to discuss the future of our fine town." What followed was a masterclass in manipulation, as Wells outlined his vision for Blackwater Ridge, a vision that required consolidated ownership of certain problematic properties along Main Street. "Progress requires sacrifice," Wells said, his gaze finding Eliza in the crowd. "And sometimes those unwilling to participate in progress must be persuaded to reconsider." The implications hung in the air. Isaiah watched Eliza's face, saw the moment understanding dawned. This wasn't just about her store. This was about making her life so unbearable she'd have no choice but to leave. When Wells finally opened the floor for discussion, the room fell silent. Then Eliza stepped forward. "Mr. Wells," her voice carried clearly despite its softness, "I understand you've made another offer on my property. I'm declining, as I've declined before." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Miss Foster," Wells's smile didn't reach his eyes, "perhaps you don't understand what's at stake. Your presence is having a detrimental effect on neighboring businesses. Customers find it disturbing." "Disturbing?" Her voice remained steady. "I sell dry goods, Mr. Wells. I keep my store clean and my prices fair." "It's not about your goods, Miss Foster." Margaret Wells stepped forward, her silk dress rustling. "It's about what's appropriate. Some sites simply aren't suited for public display." The cruelty hung in the air as laughter spread through the room. Isaiah saw Eliza flinch almost imperceptibly. That's when Isaiah made his decision. This was no longer just about reclaiming his family's land. Sometimes justice took unexpected forms. He stepped out of the shadows, the room falling silent as he moved to stand beside Eliza. "I believe," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "that the lady has made her position clear." The shock on Wells's face when he recognized Isaiah was everything he'd hoped for. 15 years had passed, but some memories never fade. "This doesn't concern you," Wells recovered quickly. "This is town business." "Actually," Isaiah smiled. "I think you'll find it concerns me deeply, Mr. Wells, more than anyone here realizes." Morning light streamed through the windows of Eliza's store as she rearranged displays, trying to distract herself from memories of the previous night's humiliation. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to find Isaiah Freeman standing there, hat in hand. "Mr. Freeman," she acknowledged, surprised. After his dramatic intervention at the meeting, she hadn't expected to see him again, at least not alive. Men who stood against Harlan Wells tended to disappear. "Miss Foster," he nodded, "I was hoping to speak with you privately." She hesitated, then gestured toward the small office at the back of the store. Once inside, she closed the door and turned to face him, suddenly aware of the small space and his imposing presence. "You took a risk last night," she said. "Wells isn't a man who forgives being challenged publicly." "I'm counting on that." Something in his tone made her study him more carefully. "Who are you really, Mr. Freeman? And why are you in Blackwater Ridge?" He smiled slightly. "Direct, I appreciate that." He reached into his coat and withdrew a packet of documents, placing them on her desk. 15 years ago, this town was barely a settlement. My parents owned land here, 100 acres where half the town now stands. Eliza's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The Silver Summit? Built on stolen land. My father refused to sell to Wells. One night, our house mysteriously caught fire. My parents didn't survive. His voice remained steady, but Eliza saw the grief and rage behind his composure. I was 14, away working at a ranch down the valley. By the time I returned, Wells had forged documents claiming he'd purchased the land legally. "I'm sorry," she said softly, the words inadequate against such loss. "I didn't come for sympathy, Miss Foster. I came because our situations align." He gestured to the documents. "These prove the forgery. I've spent 15 years building a case, making connections with territorial judges, waiting for the right moment." "And now is that moment?" she asked. "Wells is overextended. The railroad's not coming through Blackwater Ridge as he promised investors. He needs your land to build a new venture to save himself." Eliza absorbed this information. "What are you proposing?" "An alliance. I need someone Wells underestimates, someone with legitimate business standing in town. You need protection from Wells's escalating tactics." She laughed bitterly. "Protection? Mr. Freeman, look at me." She gestured to her scarred face. "I'm the town pariah. My business standing is hanging by a thread." "That's where you're wrong." He stepped closer. "Your scars make them underestimate your strength. I've seen how you face them day after day. That kind of courage is rare." Something shifted in the air between them. Recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits forged in different fires. "Wells will come after you," she warned. "I'm counting on it." The door to the store banged open, breaking their moment. Eliza hurried out to find Sheriff Reeves standing there with 2 deputies. "Everything all right in here, Miss Foster?" The sheriff's eyes darted to Isaiah as he emerged from the office. "Perfectly fine, Sheriff. Mr. Freeman is a customer." "That so?" Reeves didn't look convinced. "Well, there's been complaints about him causing disturbances. Thought I'd check things out." Isaiah stepped forward. "No disturbances here, Sheriff. Just business." "What kind of business does a colored saddle tramp have with a lady store owner?" Eliza felt her temper flare. "The kind that's none of your concern, Sheriff, unless there's a law against selling supplies to travelers." Tension crackled in the air until the sheriff finally backed down. "Just doing my job, Miss Foster. And a word of advice," he looked pointedly at Isaiah. "Be careful about the company you keep in Blackwater Ridge." After they left, Eliza turned to Isaiah. "You see what we're up against? Wells practically owns the sheriff. All the more reason to work together." He extended his hand. "Partners?" After a moment's hesitation, she took it. "Partners." The next 3 days saw a carefully orchestrated campaign. While Isaiah quietly met with the few townspeople who harbored grudges against Wells, Eliza continued her normal routine, but with subtle changes. She extended store hours, offered special discounts to miners coming off shift, and began stocking items Wells' businesses overpriced. Word spread quickly. Business improved as the working folks of Blackwater Ridge discovered they could save money at Foster's dry goods. Eliza began to see faces she'd never seen before, people who looked her in the eye and thanked her when she helped them find what they needed. Meanwhile, Wells' counterattacks grew increasingly desperate. First came rumors that her goods were substandard. When that failed, boys threw rocks through her windows. Isaiah fixed them without comment. Next, suppliers mysteriously lost her orders. Isaiah rode to the next town to secure alternate sources. Each morning, Isaiah would appear at her door before opening, and each evening he'd walk her home after closing. They developed a rhythm, working together, planning together. Something was growing between them, something neither acknowledged but both felt. On the fourth day, Margaret Wells and her social circle entered the store, faces pinched with disdain. "We've come to speak with you about your friendship." "With that Negro," Margaret announced, loud enough for the other customers to hear. "It's causing talk, Miss Foster. Inappropriate talk." Eliza continued wrapping a package for Mrs. O'Malley. "Is there something you wish to purchase, Mrs. Wells? If not, I have customers waiting." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand. This isn't a social call. It's a warning." She lowered her voice. "A woman in your condition can't afford more scandal. Being seen daily with a Negro man, it's beyond the pale." Eliza felt heat rise to her face, but kept her voice steady. "Mr. Freeman is my business associate. Now, if you'll excuse me." "Business associate?" One of Margaret's companions laughed. "Is that what they call it now?" Mrs. O'Malley, the stablemaster's wife, spoke up unexpectedly. "Leave the girl alone, Margaret. Some of us remember when this town had decency." Margaret's face hardened. "Watch yourself, Annie O'Malley. Your husband's livery lease comes up for renewal next month." The threat hung in the air as Margaret and her entourage swept out. Mrs. O'Malley squeezed Eliza's hand. "Don't you mind them, dear. Some folks are ugly clear through, scars or no scars." That evening, as Isaiah walked Eliza home, the air between them was charged with unspoken tension. "They're getting desperate," Isaiah observed. "Wells' investors arrive tomorrow. He needs to show progress." "What happens tomorrow?" Eliza asked, pausing at her garden gate. Isaiah's expression grew serious. "I present my evidence to Judge Wilson when his circuit court arrives. If all goes well, Wells will be facing fraud charges by nightfall. And if it doesn't go well, then we move to Plan B." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. In the fading light, with shadows softening her scars, Isaiah found himself studying her face, not avoiding it as others did, but truly seeing it. The unmarred side showed the beauty she must have been before. The scarred side revealed the strength she'd become after. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked quietly. "Like what?" "Like you're actually seeing me, not just—" She gestured vaguely to her scars. Isaiah considered his words carefully. "Where I come from, scars aren't something to hide. They're proof you survived something that was meant to destroy you." The simplicity of his statement struck her deeply. For years, she'd endured pity or revulsion. Never this quiet acknowledgement of her strength. "Isaiah," she began, then stopped, uncertain. "Yes?" "Be careful tomorrow. Wells won't surrender his empire without a fight." Their eyes held for a long moment before Isaiah nodded and turned to leave. Eliza watched him walk away, feeling something unfamiliar blooming in her chest, something dangerously like hope. Folks, can you feel the tension building in Blackwater Ridge? The battle lines are drawn, and tomorrow everything changes for Isaiah, Eliza, and the entire town. If you're captivated by this story of courage, justice, and unexpected connection, make sure you're subscribed to The Black Rancher right now. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our powerful stories of the forgotten heroes of the American frontier. Remember to share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that true beauty isn't about appearances. It's about the courage to stand tall when the world tries to break you down. Now, let's continue our journey as we discover what happens when a desperate man with everything to lose faces a man and woman with nothing left to fear. Dawn broke over Blackwater Ridge with ominous clouds gathering on the horizon. Isaiah stood before the mirror in his rented room, straightening his collar. He'd purchased a new shirt for today, charcoal grey with black piping, the most expensive piece of clothing he'd ever owned. Today wasn't just about justice, it was about dignity. He placed his father's pocket watch in his vest and his mother's wedding ring beside it. Today, he whispered to their memory. Across town, Eliza faced her own reflection, studying the scars that had defined her life since the fire. For the first time in years, she didn't immediately look away. Instead, she traced the uneven ridges with her fingertips, remembering Isaiah's words. Proof of survival, not shame. She'd chosen her finest dress, navy blue with subtle white trim, modest but elegant. Whatever happened today, she would face it with the same dignity she'd maintained through everything else. By mid-morning, the town was buzzing with anticipation. Judge Wilson's circuit court had set up in the town hall, and rumors flew about what cases he'd hear. No one connected this to Isaiah Freeman, no one except Harlan Wells, whose network of informants had alerted him to Isaiah's meeting request with the judge. Eliza opened her store as usual, though few customers came. Around noon, the bell above the door jangled, and she looked up to see 3 of Wells's men enter, including Decker, the brute from the livery stable confrontation. "Store's closed," Decker announced, flipping the sign and locking the door. "Get out," Eliza said firmly, reaching beneath the counter for the small derringer Isaiah had insisted she keep there. Now, Miss Foster." Decker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Wells just wants a friendly chat. He sent us to escort you." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Wasn't asking, ma'am." Decker moved toward her but froze when she raised the derringer. "I know how to use this," she said, though in truth she'd never fired a gun in her life. Decker laughed. "You really think you can shoot all 3 of us?" "She doesn't need to." The voice came from the back room where Isaiah now stood, a Winchester rifle in his hands. None of them had heard him enter through the rear door. "This doesn't concern you, boy," Decker growled. "Strange. That's what Wells said at the town meeting, yet here we are." Isaiah's voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Miss Foster isn't going anywhere with you." For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Then Decker backed toward the door. "This isn't over. Judge Wilson's been delayed, won't arrive till tomorrow. Lot can happen in a day." After they left, Eliza's hands trembled as she lowered the derringer. "They're scared," Isaiah said, setting the rifle aside. "That's why they're moving against us now. Wells must have learned about my meeting with the judge. What do we do?" "Change the battlefield." Isaiah's expression was resolute. "Wells thinks he controls this town because he owns the buildings, but a town is its people, not its property." By mid-afternoon, their plan was in motion. Isaiah visited the miners, the stable hands, the laundresses, all those who kept Blackwater Ridge running while receiving none of its benefits. Eliza sent messages to the few sympathetic business owners, O'Malley, the German baker, the Irish seamstress who had once quietly offered to make her a dress that would sit kind on her scarred shoulder. As dusk approached, word spread through town, a gathering at Foster's Dry Goods after sundown. Not a meeting, nothing so formal, just an invitation for those tired of Wells' iron grip to hear another perspective. Wells heard of it, of course. Standing in his opulent office at the Silver Summit Hotel, he sneered at Sheriff Reeves's report. "A colored saddle tramp and a scarred spinster? This is what has you worried?" Wells swirled brandy in a crystal glass. "Let them have their little gathering. Tomorrow they both leave town one way or another." "And if they resist?" Reeves asked. Wells's smile was cold. "Then make sure they're resisting arrest when you shoot them." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "On what charges?" "I don't care." "Make something up. Theft, public indecency. Use your imagination." Meanwhile, at Eliza's store, people began arriving as darkness fell, cautiously at first, then in greater numbers. By 8 o'clock, the store was packed with over 50 townspeople, not just laborers but merchants, ranchers, and even a few society wives who slipped in through the back. Isaiah stood on a crate to address them, his presence commanding respect, despite the prejudices many still carried. "Many of you know me only as a stranger who arrived a week ago. Some see only my color. Others see a threat. He paused, letting his gaze move around the room. "What you should see is a mirror, because my story is this town's story." He told them everything, about his parents' land, about Wells's fraud, about the fire that had claimed his family. He showed them the documents proving his claims. As he spoke, the mood in the room shifted from skepticism to shock to anger. "Wells didn't just steal from me," Isaiah concluded. "He's been stealing from all of you, your labor, your dignity, your right to determine your own futures." O'Malley stood up. "That's all well and good, Freeman. But what do you expect us to do? Wells owns the sheriff, the bank, and half the businesses in town." "Stand together," Eliza said, stepping forward to join Isaiah. All eyes turned to her, and for once, she didn't feel the need to hide her scars. "For years I've let people's cruelty define me, let their whispers and stares dictate how I lived. Not anymore." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Wells's power depends on our fear and division. He uses our differences to keep us fighting each other instead of him. Well, I'm done being afraid." A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not the meek, scarred woman they were used to seeing shrink from attention. "Tomorrow," Isaiah said, "Judge Wilson arrives. I'll present my evidence. But I need witnesses, people willing to testify about Wells's business practices, his threats, his corruption." One by one, people began to step forward. The baker whose shop mysteriously burned when he refused to raise prices. The widow whose mining claim was reassessed after her husband's death. The former deputy who was fired for questioning the sheriff's selective law enforcement. By the time the gathering dispersed, a plan had taken shape. The people of Blackwater Ridge would no longer be silent. What no one noticed was Margaret Wells's lady's maid, slipping away to report everything she'd heard. The next morning, Eliza opened her store to find a crowd waiting, not customers, but an angry mob led by Sheriff Reeves and Harlan Wells himself. "Eliza Foster," the sheriff announced loudly, "you're under arrest for inciting public disorder and sedition against the lawful businesses of this town." Before she could respond, Wells stepped forward. "This can still end peacefully, Miss Foster. Sign over your store, leave town, and these charges disappear." "And Mr. Freeman?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Wells' smile was cold. "Mr. Freeman won't be a concern after today." That's when she saw them dragging Isaiah from the alley beside her store, bloodied but still conscious. He'd been waiting there to escort her to the judge's arrival, as they'd planned. "What have you done to him?" she demanded. Resisting arrest, the sheriff smirked, "had to subdue him." Wells stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your choice, Miss Foster. Your store and a quiet departure, or join your friend in a cell. Judge Wilson will hear only what I want him to hear." The crowd watched, hungry for drama. These were not the supporters from last night, but Wells's faithful, shopkeepers who depended on his patronage, ladies who followed Margaret's social lead, men who benefited from the current power structure. Eliza looked at Isaiah, his face swollen from the beating, then back at Wells. 15 years of planning, of working toward justice, all about to be erased with a stroke of her pen. Then she saw something moving at the edge of town. Riders approaching. Many riders. She straightened her shoulders and looked Wells directly in the eye. "I believe," she said clearly, "that I'll wait for Judge Wilson to arrive before making any decisions." Wells' face darkened. "There's no one coming to save you, Miss Foster." "I'm not looking to be saved, Mr. Wells." Her voice carried to the gathered crowd. "I'm looking for justice. And it appears to be arriving right on schedule." All heads turned to see a dust cloud approaching from the east. Judge Wilson's entourage, accompanied by dozens of miners, ranch hands, and ordinary citizens from last night's gathering. They had ridden out at dawn to meet the judge and ensure he heard all sides of Blackwater Ridge's story. Wells' face drained of color as he realized his carefully constructed world was collapsing. The circuit court of Judge Ezekiel Wilson convened in Blackwater Ridge's town hall at precisely noon. Unlike the usual empty formality of the judge's visits, when Wells effectively dictated which cases would be heard and how they would be decided, today's proceedings drew the largest crowd in the town's history. Judge Wilson, a stern man with penetrating eyes and a reputation for incorruptibility, surveyed the packed room with thinly veiled surprise. "It appears," he remarked dryly, "that justice has become a popular entertainment in Blackwater Ridge." Wells and his lawyer sat at one table, their expressions conveying confidence they no longer felt. At the other table sat Isaiah, his face still showing evidence of the morning's beating, and Eliza beside him, her scarred profile held high. The evidence Isaiah presented was meticulous: land deeds, forged signatures, witness testimonies, bank records showing suspicious transactions coinciding with the deaths of Isaiah's parents. As the afternoon wore on, Wells's confident facade crumbled, replaced by desperate objections that the judge overruled one by one. When Isaiah finished presenting his case, Judge Wilson called a brief recess. The crowd buzzed with speculation. No one had ever seen Wells cornered like this, and the town held its collective breath, waiting to see if the power structure that had defined their lives for 15 years was truly about to fall. After the recess, Judge Wilson rendered his verdict. "The evidence presented by Mr. Freeman is both compelling and disturbing," he announced. "I find that Harlan Wells did indeed commit fraud in his acquisition of the Freeman property. Furthermore, the circumstances surrounding the fire that claimed the lives of Joseph and Mary Freeman warrant a full criminal investigation." The courtroom erupted. Wells leapt to his feet, face purple with rage. "This is outrageous. You can't—" "I can, and I have, Mr. Wells," the judge interrupted coldly. "You are hereby ordered to surrender all claims to the property in question. Additionally, you will be held pending further investigation into charges of fraud, corruption, and potentially murder." As the sheriff, now suddenly dutiful under the judge's stern gaze, led Wells away, the man's final venomous glare was directed not at Isaiah but at Eliza. In that moment, she understood that in Wells's mind, her betrayal, siding with Isaiah, standing against him publicly, was the ultimate insult. The following days brought seismic changes to Blackwater Ridge. With Wells in custody and evidence of his corruption exposed, many of his business holdings were frozen pending legal reviews. The power vacuum created opportunities for long-suppressed voices to be heard. Isaiah, now legally recognized as the rightful owner of significant town property, found himself in a position of unexpected influence. Despite the victory, Isaiah remained troubled. Justice had been served, but his parents were still gone. The land he'd reclaimed was now part of a town built on their graves. Eliza sensed his inner conflict and understood it all too well. Winning didn't always heal the wounds that drove the fight. A week after the trial, Eliza was closing her store when Isaiah appeared in the doorway. They'd barely spoken since the courthouse, both busy with the aftermath of their victory and perhaps uncertain about what came next. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said without preamble. Something lurched in Eliza's chest. "Leaving? But you just reclaimed your family's land." "And I'm selling most of it, keeping the original homestead plot." His eyes met hers. "I bought land outside town, good grazing land, going to start the ranch my father always dreamed of." "I see." She busied herself with the ledger, not wanting him to see her disappointment. "That sounds like a fine plan. There's a lot of work ahead." "Too much for one person." She looked up, surprised by his tone. "I came to ask—" For the first time since she'd met him, Isaiah looked uncertain. "Would you consider a business partnership? I know about cattle, but I'm no good with figures and planning. You've kept this store running against impossible odds. That's the kind of thinking a new ranch needs." "A business partnership," she repeated, the words tasting bitter somehow. Isaiah stepped closer. "To start with. But Eliza—" He rarely used her first name, and it sent a shiver through her. "I'm hoping for more in time, if you'd consider it." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Margaret Wells stormed in, several society ladies trailing behind her. Despite her husband's disgrace, Margaret had somehow maintained her social standing, or at least the illusion of it. "So it's true," she spat, looking from Isaiah to Eliza. "You're actually considering leaving town with him." She made the last word sound like something filthy. Eliza straightened. My plans are none of your concern, Mrs. Wells. It's the concern of every decent person in this town. As if your appearance wasn't scandal enough, now you'd sink to this?" She gestured contemptuously toward Isaiah. The old Eliza might have shrunk from this confrontation. The old Eliza had spent years trying to be invisible, to avoid exactly this kind of public shaming. But that Eliza was gone. "Mrs. Wells," she said calmly, "I believe it's time for you to leave my store." Margaret's face contorted with rage. "Your store? Your store exists because we tolerated your presence, because we pitied you. Who do you think would want to look at that ruined face every day if not for charity?" The words were designed to cut deep, to reopen old wounds. In the past, they would have succeeded, but something had changed in Eliza, something fundamental. She walked around the counter to stand directly before Margaret, forcing the woman to look at her scars up close. "These scars," Eliza said quietly, "remind me daily that I survived when I should have died. They taught me that appearances lie, that beauty often masks cruelty, while disfigurement can house extraordinary strength. What do your perfect features teach you, Mrs. Wells, besides contempt for anyone different from yourself?" The store had fallen silent. Even Margaret's companions looked uncomfortable now. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Margaret whispered. "Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Eliza replied, "and more importantly, I know who I am. Now please leave." For a moment it seemed Margaret might explode with fury. Then Isaiah stepped forward, his presence a reminder of how thoroughly her husband's power had been broken. "You heard the lady?" he said quietly. Margaret turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You'll regret this, both of you. This town has standards, even if the law has temporarily lost its mind. No decent person will accept this." She waved her hand between them, encompassing whatever she imagined their relationship to be. After she left, the store remained silent. Isaiah looked at Eliza with new admiration. "You didn't have to defend me," he said. "I wasn't defending you. I was defending us." The word hung in the air between them. "And answering your question, yes, I would consider a business partnership, and yes, in time, perhaps more." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Word had spread overnight about Margaret Wells' confrontation with Eliza and Isaiah, embellished, of course, with each telling. By noon, the town was humming with speculation about what would happen at the community celebration planned for that evening. The celebration had been organized to mark a new beginning for Blackwater Ridge, a symbolic fresh start after Wells's corruption had been exposed. Nearly everyone in town planned to attend, not least because Judge Wilson himself would be present before departing the next day. Eliza spent the day considering whether to attend. Part of her wanted to avoid the stares and whispers that would inevitably follow her, but a stronger part refused to hide any longer. Isaiah arrived at her door at sunset, dressed in a new suit, his horse and buggy waiting outside. "You don't have to do this," he said as he helped her into the buggy. "We could just leave town tonight, start fresh." She shook her head. "Running away isn't starting fresh, it's just running away." The town square was transformed for the celebration. Lanterns hung from trees, tables groaned with food, and a small band played lively tunes. As Eliza and Isaiah arrived together, a hush fell over the nearest groups, then spread outward like ripples in a pond. Margaret Wells stood with her remaining social circle, her expression thunderous as she watched them approach. Beside her, several town council members shifted uncomfortably, caught between old prejudices and new realities. Judge Wilson, who had been speaking with O'Malley, broke away to greet them. "Mr. Freeman, Miss Foster, a pleasure to see you both. I was just discussing the remarkable changes already visible in Blackwater Ridge. Changes like letting him attend town functions," Margaret's voice carried deliberately, "or her parading her arrangement with him in public." The judge's eyebrows rose, but before he could respond, Isaiah stepped forward, his voice clear and carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "Mrs. Wells seems concerned about propriety," he said, addressing the crowd rather than her directly. "Perhaps I can ease her mind." He turned to Eliza, taking her hand. "Miss Foster, in front of these witnesses, I'm asking formally for your hand in marriage. Not for convenience, not for business, but because in you I've found courage and dignity I've never seen before. because in your eyes, scarred or not, I see a future worth building." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret's face drained of color. Eliza looked up at Isaiah, searching his eyes for any doubt, any hesitation. Finding none, she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. That's when Isaiah did the unthinkable. In front of the entire town, he bent down and kissed her, not a chaste peck, but a real kiss, full of promise. And he didn't kiss the unmarred side of her face as some might have expected. He kissed her fully, scars and all, with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Some turned away in disgust or shock. Others, to Eliza's surprise, broke into spontaneous applause, led by Mrs. O'Malley and the German baker. Margaret Wells and her circle stormed away, but for once, Eliza didn't care. The weight of others' judgment, carried for so long, had finally lifted. Judge Wilson cleared his throat, eyes twinkling. "Well, it seems I might have one more official duty before leaving Blackwater Ridge tomorrow. That is, if you two don't wish to wait for a proper ceremony." Isaiah looked at Eliza, leaving the decision to her. "No," she said firmly, "no more waiting." As the sun set over Blackwater Ridge, Judge Wilson married them beneath the lantern-lit trees. The town remained divided in its reaction, some celebrating this new beginning, others scandalized by its defiance of convention. But for the first time in her life, Eliza wasn't defined by what others saw when they looked at her. As Isaiah slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's ring, she realized with a start. He whispered words meant only for her. "They laughed at your scars until they realized you were stronger than they'd ever be." In that moment, surrounded by both acceptance and rejection, Eliza understood that true healing had nothing to do with her scars fading. It came from finding someone who saw beyond them to the person she truly was, and from finally seeing that person herself. Sometimes the most profound acts of courage aren't riding into gunfights or facing down outlaws. They're simply refusing to be defined by how others see you. Sometimes true love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your scars as badges of honor rather than marks of shame. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button right now and join the Black Rancher family. Share this video with someone struggling with their own visible or invisible scars, someone who needs to be reminded that their worth isn't determined by others' judgments. Every like, every share, every comment helps these forgotten stories of America's frontier reach more people who need to hear them. Stories of courage, dignity, and love that transcended the prejudices of their time and perhaps can help us transcend those of our own. Thank you for riding with us through Blackwater Ridge. Until our trails cross again next week with another powerful story from our shared history. This is the Black Rancher, reminding you that true beauty has never been about what's on the surface.